Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. And as we are nearing the end of a really entertaining for me and fun year in OOTP 24 with the expansion Buffalo Wings, OOTP 25 should be released tomorrow as I am recording this on Thursday evening. We've got a chance to do something historic with the Buffalo Wings in this episode as we get ready for the playoffs. We are 11 wins away from a World Series championship. And if we are able to get those 11 wins, which would give us our fourth title in the last 5 years, I think we're also in a spot to not even arguably have put together the best season in Major League Baseball history. The 127 wins we put together in the regular season this year shatters the all-time record. The 784 winning percentage we put together this year in the regular season shatters the previous record of 763 by the 1906 Chicago Cubs. I did go back and look, and there were 5 teams in the 19th century when seasons were much shorter that did have winning percentages higher than our 784. 2 of them were National League teams, 2 of them were National Association teams, and 1 of them was a Union Association team. So there's some debate as to whether all of those leagues even should be considered major leagues. And the most recent of those teams was 1884 with the St. Louis Maroons. And they were also the only one of those 5 teams that played over 100 games with 113 games in the season. So the 763 winning percentage by the Cubs is generally considered the highest in Major League history, and we eclipsed that this year. And I was a little surprised by this. I guess I shouldn't be in retrospect, but the 37-game margin over the second-place team that we had is also the largest in baseball history. I was assuming there would probably be some of those dominant Yankees teams of 70, 80, 90 years ago that were dominating the American League that might have had a huge season. But the biggest margin in a division in history is actually a lot more recent than that. It's the 1995 Cleveland Indians, who in a strike-shortened year coming back from the lost playoff year of 1994 went 144 in 144 games, and despite the abbreviated schedule, they beat the Kansas City Royals, who were second place in the division, by 30 games that year. The Royals were 70 and 74. Every team besides the Indians had a losing record in the division, so we beat that record by 7 games as well. So we've got the opportunity, as I said, if we win 11 more games, to be able to, on almost every level possible, claim that this is the greatest team in mythical baseball history. But before we get into the playoffs, I just want to address a couple of comments/questions from the previous episode. Why Me 943 just asked to look at Danny Black's scouting report. And interestingly, Danny Black, you may remember, was leading the National League in wins for large chunks of this season. He ended up fading a bit down the stretch. Only 2 wins in July, 2 wins in August, and 2 wins in September. And the reason that's interesting, at least to me, with his 19-4 record, he ended up being 1 win away from giving us a 4th 20-game winner this year, which is something that's only been done twice in baseball history. Most recently, the 1971 Orioles, and before that, the 1920 White Sox. So that would have been one other piece of history that the team could have achieved this year. But Why Me 943 was just wondering, with Black's incredible start to his career over these first 3 seasons in Major League Baseball, how his scouting had evolved. And it really hasn't changed that much. You can see we think his stuff is another 5 points better now than we did a few years ago. But really everything else is the same. We felt for several years at this point that he had 65 potential in all three of the pitching categories. And he kind of hit that 65 in control about a year and a half ago. And then this year he got to the 65 and stuff. So he has gotten a little better. His velocity is still the same as it's been, throwing in the mid to high 90s. He does, when we look at his ratings, still potentially have another 5 points to gain on that cutter, at least according to our scout. But his performance has been fantastic, and as a number 3 starter, feel real good about having Danny Black in our rotation. And the other interesting question came from Not My Four-Ply about Ernesto Zambrana, a pitcher that we looked at in international amateur free agency about a decade ago. And he was traded from the Giants, or from the Reds to the Giants last season. He is in line for finally winning a Cy Young Award this year, leading the league in innings, strikeouts, ERA, strikeouts per 9 inning, quality start percentage, FIP minus, and also putting up a ridiculous 11.3 pitcher WAR. So an outstanding pitcher who is an Iron Man, has off the charts stuff, 4 incredible pitches, and is still not even 27 years old. And Not My Four-Ply was wondering, as I was after he asked the question, what did you have to trade away to get a pitcher like that? And it turns out I don't think the package was all that incredible. I think that the Giants fleeced the Reds. They got Juan Delgado, 20-year-old outfield prospect. To me, best case scenario for him is probably a 4th outfielder. They also got Josh Fleming, a 24-year-old starting pitcher who had a torn labrum this year, so he only pitched, I guess he still pitched in 12 games. A little surprising that he's only 1 week away from recovering from that, but I guess we are in October at this point. But looks to me like a back end of the rotation starter in a best case scenario. So 2 useful players, but certainly nowhere near the level of Ernesto Zambrana. And then the big thing that San Francisco gave up for him was Joe McClellan, who's 25 years old, listed as the number 57 prospect in baseball. Did make his major league debut this year for the Reds, 8-9 with a 3.14 ERA, 1.31 ERA plus, 86 FIP minus. And certainly with his good personality traits, plus stamina, plus holding runners, a really good fastball, nice curve, nice sinker, think he can be a very good major league pitcher. But honestly, with these ratings, the 3-pitch arsenal, only throwing in the low to mid 90s, I kind of view him as a good number 2 or a great number 3, more than I view him as a true ace. And he's also less than 2 years younger than Zambrana is. So I think the Giants did fantastic in this trade. As I said in my response to Not My Four-Ply in the comments to the last episode, I'm sure if we had tried to trade for Zambrana, they probably wouldn't have wanted Danny Black, Jim Reichert, and the top prospect in our system, and they still probably wouldn't have done it. But it looks like the AI Giants took good advantage of the AI Reds to add Mr. Zambrana to their team. And now we'll turn our attention to trying to win the 11 games we need to really solidify this team's place in the history of baseball. As typical for the playoffs, we're going to go with 12 pitchers and 14 position players. So that meant we had to cut someone who's been on the 26-man roster as far as the pitchers. And Mike George, who we picked up off the waiver wire this year, was solid for us with a 3.38 ERA in 34 2/3 innings, struck out 47 batters, was a good, solid pitcher. But with Jim Coles, our number 5 starter, who was 15-4, another right-hander moving to the bullpen, ultimately made the decision that George would not make the 26-man playoff roster. And moving George off the team did allow us to put the excellent young left-handed hitter David Sandoval on the team. He spent most of the season in Albany, where he had a monster year, and he was very effective at the major league level too, hitting .373 and 51 at-bats, 4 doubles, a triple, and a home run. Put up a wacky 169 WRC plus for us in that limited usage. So hopefully he will hit a pinch hit homer or 2 for us along the way in these playoffs, since he will be on the playoff roster. We're in a good spot. We were the best team in baseball by far, as we talked about, and nobody on the injured list. Everybody is healthy at this point. So it's just a matter of finding out who we are going to be playing. And taking a look at the playoff tree, we're either going to get the Braves from our division or the Padres from the National League West. But by far the second and third best teams in the National League were the Cardinals and the Giants. And we will not need to be facing either of those teams until a potential matchup in the NLCS. They were also the only 2 other 100-win teams in baseball this season. And 3 of the 4 wild card series ended up being sweeps. The Rangers took out the Twins. They'll be facing the A's. The Blue Jays took out the Angels. They'll be facing the Tigers. The Marlins took out the Giants, and they'll be facing the Cardinals. And then in the one series that did go to 3 games, the Padres took out the Atlanta Braves. And they will be our opponent for the NLDS beginning tomorrow. And as we get ready to begin our 21st consecutive season with postseason action, we're headed to the divisional series, as I said, and those 5-game divisional series can always be tricky. Fortunately, we are trying to get to the NLCS for an 8th consecutive season here. So we've been really good in the playoffs over the last 7 years. Would be a huge upset if we were not to get back to the NLCS at the very least this year. As we've talked about, our goal is to win 11 games and clinch a spot in history. Kind of an interesting matchup here, because as great as we were this year with that .783 winning percentage, we did actually lose the season series to the Padres 2-1. I'm guessing there's not too many season series we lost, and I'm pretty confident that the only season series we lost were teams that we only played once in a very short series. But that said, they're probably not afraid of us. And it looks like they've got a couple of our former players on their team. Damani Essien, who was our starting shortstop for a couple seasons. Juan Estrada, who, although Estrada looks like he's out with an injury, former 2-way player for us for many years. And then Tim Gaglia, who was a prospect with our team 10, 15 years ago, traded him away relatively early in his career. So some familiar names for the Padres, but even though they did take the series from us, we led the National League in runs scored and led the National League in runs allowed with a ridiculous 470 runs against this year. They were 6th in the National League in runs scored and 4th in runs against, so a good solid team, 92 wins for them. But we allowed 180 fewer runs than them this year, so we allowed more than a run less than them per game, and we outscored them by 168 runs this year, so we outscored them by more than a run per game. So everything suggests that we should win this series. We'll find out shortly whether we do or not. Nehemiah Vidale, one of our 3 20-game winners, 20-3 with a ridiculous 1.83 ERA, a league best 0.90 whip and an 8.3 WAR, which was second in the league behind only Zambrana among pitchers. So the excellent lefty will be on the mound for us. For San Diego, Jeremy Boho, a 27-year-old right-hander who was 4-4 with a 4.72 ERA, split the season between AAA El Paso and the Padres. So certainly think the pitching matchup favors us here in game number 1. And unfortunately, we already are down. I told you these 5-game series can be tough. Vidale took the loss. Corum with the win in relief, it looks like. We got homers from Medina and Toledo, but they got 4 home runs off of us, including 2 by Castanon, excellent third baseman who is, I believe, was the MVP a year ago. Yeah, he was the, yes, 2047 National League MVP. So we are already down 1-0. And unfortunately for us, we actually took a 5-1 lead into the 4th inning. And then they scored a couple in the 4th and 4 in the 5th to take a 7-5 lead. We chipped away with a run in the 6th, and that was as close as we would ever get. We did score a run in the 9th, run scoring single from Ishmael Velasco, who's always clutch in the playoffs. But losing game number 1 with Vidale on the mound, 9 hits, 2 walks, 7 earned runs over 4 2/3 innings. Pretty confident that is the worst performance of the season for him, and it comes at an inopportune time. Auclair was not great in relief, but Vidale takes the loss. Did get 3 hits from Habasham, 2 from Velasco, and 2 from Toledo. But we find ourselves in an early hole, and we've got to win now 3 of these next 4, or the dream season will turn into a nightmare. Jeff Simons, a 31-year-old lefty, going to be on the mound for the Padres. Porky has some great stuff, but very poor control. 12-5 with a 2.64 ERA. Struck out a ridiculous 240 batters in 170-plus innings, but also did walk 94. We've got our former ace on the mound. The only reason he's not is because we had picked up Vidale as a free agent, and Jim Lance was 20-2 this year with a 2.99 ERA. So certainly a huge game for us today. Want to go to San Diego tied rather than facing potentially 3 consecutive must-win games. And we do get a 3-0 victory. So Lance must have been pretty good. McClintock with the save. Got a homer from Steve Banks. He was starting today against a lefty pitcher at catcher for us, even though he only plays about 40 games a year due to the platoon situation. We scored a run in the 5th and 2 in the 7th. The 2-run homer from Banks in the 7th was the big blow, although Habersham's run-scoring double in the 5th was the game-winning RBI. Velasco and Banks, the only guys on the team with 2 hits for us. Lance, 3 hits and 2 walks over 6 1/3 innings. And then the way we draw it up in a perfect scenario, Auclair and McClintock got the last 2 2/3 innings of scoreless relief for us. So we've avoided the real crisis scenario, still have turned home field advantage over to the Padres. Now we just need to make sure we win at least 1 game in San Diego to hopefully get back home for a game number 5 with Vidale on the mound. Hard to imagine Vidale losing twice in a series, although maybe I just jinxed myself by saying that, but we will find out. Chris Longwell on the mound for San Diego, 12-6 with a 3.34 ERA. The 31-year-old is a good, solid major league pitcher. His third pitch, his slider, is definitely not exceptional, though. Seems like someone we should be able to score some runs off of. Danny Black on the mound for us. We've already talked about him. 19-4 with a 2.70 ERA. Led the league in fewest walks per 9 and the best strikeout to walk ratio in the league while putting up a 6.8 WAR as our number 3 starter. And we do get a 7-5 win today, so it wasn't a perfect day from Black, but got the runs that we needed. Medina and Huntington, who is normally our starting catcher, back in the lineup against the righty, hit homers for us. McClintock with his second consecutive save. Padres jumped out to a 1-0 lead and took a 2-1 lead into the 6th. And in the 6th, we jumped on them for 5 runs. Run-scoring single from Jim Riker. Good to see him come through. He's had some less than stellar performances in the playoffs, given that he's now led the National League in ribbies 3 consecutive years. So hopefully we can get his bat going this postseason. And then Ramiro Medina with a bases-loaded double was the big blow in that inning. 2 hits and 4 ribbies for Medina, Huntington, and Fuchs also with a couple of hits. Black, 8 hits, 4 runs, all earned, and 1 walk over 6 innings, so not a vintage outing. Auclair, not great, but Auclair, Palencia, and McClintock do get the final 9 outs for us. Sam Bateman, one of their relievers, was injured while pitching, diagnosis pending, so that could be a loss for San Diego. So we've at least guaranteed ourselves a 5th game in this series. Clearly now the goal is to not have to face that win or die game number 5, and also put ourselves in a position for a potential matchup against the Marlins or the Cardinals, where we've got our pitching rotation all set up. And the only way to do that is to get the win today. Andres Flores, 31-year-old righty, on the mound for San Diego. He was 0-3 in the majors this year, but did have a 2.48 ERA. And we're going to have Joey Bills, our 3rd 20-game winner, his first full season in the majors this year. Led the National League with 21 wins, 21-4 record, 3.25 ERA for the 26-year-old right-hander. Let's see if we can avoid that scary game number 5. And fortunately we can. A 4-3 victory, so we bounce back after losing that first game. We'll have the rotation all set back up the way that we'd like it for the NLCS. Got a homer from Ishmael Velasco, and Ishmael Velasco, surprise, surprise, wins a playoff series Most Valuable Player award here in the NLDS. Take a look at the box score. We scored a run in the first, solo homer by Velasco, 2 more in the 5th, and then 1 in the 7th to take a 4-0 lead. And then we kind of made it interesting. The bullpen was not great in this series, but we held on to get the W, 3 for 3 with the 3 ribbies for Velasco. A couple of hits from Toledo as well. You look even with the ribby yesterday, Riker hit just $167 in the series. Casares just $143, and Ferguson only 167. If Riker and Casares in particular, our 3 and 4 hitters, can heat up in the coming series, I think will be pretty tough for teams to stop. Bills, excellent, 7 1/3 innings, 4 hits, 4 walks, only 1 earned run while striking out 6. Palencia got 2 outs to close out the 8th, and then McClintock was not a vintage performance with 2 hits and 2 earned runs in the 9th inning, but he did get the job done in the bottom of the 9th. He saved each game in the series, and we are on to an 8th consecutive trip to the National League Championship Series, and we are now just 8 games away from potentially making history. And every divisional series except ours ended up going 5 games. The A's took out the Rangers 3-2, and then the Blue Jays upset the Tigers 3-2. The A's have already taken a 1-0 lead on the Blue Jays in the American League Championship Series. The Marlins had an early lead on the Cardinals after they swept the Giants out of the playoffs, the third best team in baseball. But the Cardinals came back and won the series. So the 2 best teams in baseball are going to be facing off here in the NLCS. We got to test ourselves against the best. So it's going to be our 127-win Buffalo Wings against the 107-win St. Louis Cardinals. We did take the season series against them, but similar to the Padres, it was just a 3-game series. We took 2 out of 3. And the Cardinals, not surprisingly, with the second best record in baseball, are right behind us. We were first in the National League in runs scored and runs against. They were second in the National League in runs scored, tied for second more accurately, and second in the National League in runs against. So the 2 best teams in baseball are going to be meeting here in the National League Championship Series. We've got Vidale back on the mound. Hopefully he can recover from that poor first game of the series in the NLDS. Going up against Chris Newell, excellent right-hander. He is a 2-time Cy Young Award winner, once in each league over the last 4 years. 17-6 this year for St. Louis with a ridiculous 1.81 ERA. So should be an incredible pitching matchup between Newell and Vidale in Game 1 here in Buffalo. Hopefully we can get this series off to a better start than the last one. Not to be the case, though. Another loss, and it looks like our bullpen, which had been so great all year, cost us again. 3-2 loss. The Cardinals jumped on with 2 runs in each of the first and the second innings to take a 2-0 lead. We came back in the 5th, run-scoring single from Reichert, and then in the 6th, run-scoring single from Ferguson in the 5th, and then a run-scoring single from Reichert in the bottom of the 6th to tie things up. But in the 7th, Hrabowski, a run-scoring single against Eau Claire to give them a 3-2 lead, and that was it. Only 4 hits for us, only 6 hits for them. So the pitchers were good, as you would expect. Newell, 2 hits, 3 walks, 9 strikeouts, 2 earned runs over 5 2/3. And then Beards and Grage Danish with 3 1/3 innings of scoreless relief. Vidale gave us a quality start, 4 hits, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts, 2 runs, both earned in 6 innings. But Eau Claire and Palencia, unlike St. Louis, combined to allow that 1 run by Eau Claire, and that proved to be the difference. Eau Claire with a 5.68 ERA in the playoffs this year. He did strike out 5 in 2 innings, but once again, we are down in game number 1 of a series and have the pressure on us to bounce back in game number 2. We've got the guy who's been great in the playoffs for the last year plus on the mound. Lance was 4-0 in the playoffs last year when we won the World Series, and he won his first game this year with a great outing, going up against Jesus Rosa, a 26-year-old right-hander, 11-10 with a 4.37 ERA. Excellent control. His stuff not off the charts, but still a good, solid pitcher. But we're going to have to get a W here today. And we do with a 10-6 win. A couple of home runs for St. Louis, still none for Buffalo in this NLCS. But we've evened things up. Teams traded runs in the first, and then we added 2 in the second, 1 in the fourth, and 6th in the 6th to really break things open with a 10-1 lead. After that, they did score 5 runs on us in the last 3 innings, so the bullpen still not operating the way that we'd prefer, but definitely got some more offense today. 15 hits, and 6 of our players had multi-hit games for us. Danny Ferguson continues to struggle, hitting just a $176 in the playoffs, And honestly, Reichert and Casares have not been great either. Those two are without home runs in the playoffs, and Toledo's only hit one after all three of those players had well over 30 during the regular season. Lance, excellent outing. 5 hits, no walks, 9 strikeouts, 1 run over the 6 innings. Coles with an ugly outing in relief for us. 3 hits, 2 walks, 5 earned runs in his 2 innings. McClintock and Auclair came on to kind of stabilize things and get us to St. Louis with a 1-1 series tie rather than falling behind 2-0. So we did what we needed to do. We've got a day off tomorrow, but we're going to have to win at least one of these 3 games in St. Louis to get back to Buffalo. Our hope is to win at least 2 of these games in St. Louis, so we're headed back to Buffalo with a lead and a little less pressure. We've got Danny Black on the mound. He wasn't his vintage self in game number 3 of the DS, but we still got the win. Howie Frazier, who's been very good in the playoffs, left-hander, 20-5 with a 2.61 ERA, struck out 286 batters this year, only allowed 12 homers in 217 1/3 innings. Fabulous stuff, fabulous movement, throws in the high 90s. He's a captain. So we're up against a tough lefty here. And we do get an 8-2 win. Casares finally comes through with his first home run of the playoffs. So that gives us a 2-1 lead. We ended up taking a 5-0 lead as of the 4th inning. Added 3 more in the 6th. Reichert with a run-scoring double in the 1st. Velasco a 2-run double in the 3rd. Casares with a 2-run homer in the 4th. So an easier game for us there. Nice to see Casares with a couple of hits. Nice to see Reichert driving in some runs as well. Would love for those guys to get hot. Black, 7 hits and 1 walk scattered over 5 2/3. Only allows a run. Caper and Auclair come on in relief. Juan Palomo, the player of the game for us, 3 for 3, 3 runs scored. So we've gotten 1 win to guarantee that we will be playing in Buffalo again this year. Now the goal is to win one of these next 2 games, so we'll be going back to Buffalo with the lead. Joey Bills, the young right-hander on the mound for us. Bob Yates here in Game 4, 29-year-old, 15-6 with a 3.38 ERA. Doesn't have an overwhelming arsenal, but he is a proven major leaguer at the age of 29 at this point. We do get a win, though, 7-6. Looks like it went into the bullpens, and Grage Danis, who got the save in Game 1, took the loss. Auclair, who got the loss in Game 1, picked up the win. And McClintock with a save. Only 1 homer, but it was by Sandoval, so that was likely a big pinch hit homer. As we talked about, his role on the team was to be a pinch hitter for us, and we were hoping he'd knock one out of the park in one of these games, and may have been a big blow for us here. The game was tied 2-2 after, tied 4-4 after 5. They had a 6-5 lead on us after 6, and then we scored 2 runs in the 8th, and it was Sandoval, a 2-run homer in the top of the 8th. So going down to 12 pitchers and adding Sandoval to the lineup, very big, a pinch hit home run for the youngster. So a huge blow for him. Other than that, Habersham was the offense, 3 for 5 with 5 ribbies. So Habersham drove in every single one of our other runs. So a monster game from him. Habersham also stole a base for us. Bills, not great. 9 hits, 3 walks, 6 earned runs over 5 1/3 innings. But Palencia, Auclair, and McClintock combined for 3 2/3 innings of 1 hit, scoreless relief. Yates was not great in the start for them, and we eventually got to the bullpen. So great to see Sandoval come through with a big hit for us. Knew he wouldn't be playing much, but he certainly made me glad that he's on the roster with that performance yesterday. But we're on to another day now, and now the hope is to just get this series over with. If we have to play again in Buffalo in this series, we'll at the very least have a lead. But with Vidale having pitched the only 2 games that we've lost thus far in the playoffs, would hope that having our ace on the mound can get us a W today, but clearly going up against an excellent pitcher for the Cardinals in the case of Newell, and they are a prideful 107-win team. But we get the series in a 1-0 victory. Palencia with the win in relief, McClintock with the save, Grage Danish takes the loss for the second straight day. So we must have gotten the lone run somehow in the late innings of this one. Jamari Habersham, the series MVP. So we finally have won a game that was started by Vidale. So that was good to see. Got the lone run in the top of the 8th. A sac fly by Ishmael Velasco. I'm guessing perhaps he scored Habersham. No, he actually scored Ferguson. So not a ton of offense. Habersham, especially after the 5 ribbies yesterday, not a shock to see him named the series MVP. Leadoff hitter, 350 in the playoffs this year with 10 ribbies. Vidale, 4 hits, 1 walk over 6 innings. Palencia and McClintock combined for 3 innings of hitless relief. And Grage Danish, a really good pitcher, someone who we looked at from back when he was a prospect. 1-5 this year with a 2.76 ERA and 22 saves. That was just with San Diego. Overall for the year, 1-6 with 45 saves. And he was much better with St. Louis than he was in San Diego before they picked him up in a trade. So it looks like, actually that's a really weird trade too. 2 divisional rivals who both ended up in the playoffs. One of them trading a closer to the other one during the pennant race. But interesting things happen. Our old buddy Joe Scott allowed 1 hit while striking out 1 in relief. Newell was excellent. 4 hits and 12 strikeouts over 7 innings of scoreless baseball. But we got to the bullpen, and we are now 4 wins away from history. Each series, we've lost the first game at home and then come back to win every other game in the series. Not sure whether we'll be facing the A's or the Blue Jays in the World Series, but would certainly hope that we win game number 1 at home to get the World Series off to a good start. And the team that stands between us and a potential 4th championship in 5 years and a 5th championship in 8 years is a familiar foe, the playoff-tested Toronto Blue Jays, who you may remember we beat in the Great Lakes series back in 2045, just 3 years ago, are back in the World Series. They took out both of the teams with home field advantage, the AL East winning Tigers in the divisional series, and then the AL West winning A's in the American League Championship Series. So now the Blue Jays have an even bigger task ahead of them against our strong Buffalo team. We did take the season series against the Blue Jays. Again, it was just a 3-game series, so no huge sample size to think about. But at 86 and 76, although the Blue Jays were second in the American League East, they would have been 41 games behind us if they played in the same league as us, and they were 41 games behind us just looking at the numbers, even though they didn't play in the same league as us. They have an excellent pitching staff, second in the National League in runs against, but their offense, one of the worst in the American League. They rank 15th out of 16 teams, 657 runs scored. So certainly, once again, on paper, we look like big favorites. Chris Weichel will be on the mound for the Blue Jays. The left-hander, 13-7 with a 3.14 ERA this year, struck out 254 batters, had an excellent 1.08 WHIP, 130 ERA plus, 81 FIP minus, and a 4.9 WAR to go with that 2.42 SIERA. So an excellent season for Weichel. We've got our own excellent pitcher on the mound, though, in Jim Lance, who has been really good this playoff run for us. He pitched game 2 in both of the first 2 series, and we won both of those games after falling behind. As I talked about at the end of the NLCS, the goal is to get this World Series off to a good start with a win in game number 1. And we do get a 7-1 victory. Lance outpitches Weichel, going up against the lefty. Banks was in the lineup at catcher again, and he hit another homer for us. So hasn't played all that often, but he's been productive. We got a run in the third on a single by Palomo. They tied it in the top of the fourth. We scored another run in the bottom of the fourth on the solo homer by Banks. Added 2 in the fifth on a 2-run single by Velasco. And then broke things open with 3 in the 8th. It looks like Medina, Habasham, and Palomo involved in driving in those runs. So Habersham, 4 for 5 with a run scored and a ribby. It seems like he's going to make a strong bid if we can win this to get World Series MVP in addition to NLCS MVP. Casares still hitting just 211, and Reichert hitting just a $186 in the playoffs this year. We did have the homer from Casares last series, still none from Reichert. So if he could heat up for us these last few games, it'll go a long way towards pushing us to victory. Got a couple of injuries, unfortunately. Left fielder Daniel Aguayo-Leal injured being hit by a pitch, and reliever Chad Aguirre injured while pitching. Aguirre back spasms, minimal impact on hitting and running, supposedly no impact on throwing, so that could be worse. Looking at Aguayo-Leal, jammed finger day-to-day for 2 days, minimal impact on throwing, so probably not a huge issue with either of those injuries, especially with a day off coming up after game number 2. If we're facing a righty tomorrow, Aguayo-Leal won't even be in the starting lineup. So that is hopefully what will happen. We'll find out shortly. Weichel, not great for them. 7 hits, 3 walks, 4 earned runs over 4 2/3. Lance, 4 hits, 2 walks, 1 earned run over 5 innings. And then Palencia, Auclair, and Aguirre combined for 4 innings of 1 hit, no run relief. So we'll move to tomorrow, find out who we're going to be facing. But we do have a 1-0 lead in the series, so we're 3 wins away from history at this point. And the goal, certainly, with our ace Vidale back on the mound, is to get the win today and maybe have Vidale actually pick up his first win of these playoffs. Jonathan Chapman, a right-hander for Toronto, the 35-year-old, was 12-9 with a 3.53 ERA, 213 Ks this year. So a couple of good, solid pitchers on the mound. Righty for Toronto, lefty for Buffalo. Let's see if we can take a 2-0 lead and really put some pressure on the Blue Jays. Not to be the case. Kashuk with the loss in relief. I don't know that he's really pitched much in the playoffs at all. Did get a homer from Casares, but a 3-2 loss. I don't remember seeing Kashuk in many box scores, so that's disappointing. Game was tied 1-1 after 6. They scored 2 in the top of the 8th. A 2-run triple by Ibarra off of Kashuk. We scored a run in the bottom of the 8th to cut the gap to 3-2. So although we felt good by winning the first game in the series, we're really not in any different position than we were in each of the previous 2 series. We're tied 1-1 while heading onto the road. I guess the negative thing for us to hopefully overcome is that each of those first two series, the team that lost the first game went on to win every other game in the series. Clearly, we hope that that does not happen here today. In the coming days, Vidale, no hits allowed over 5 innings. Did allow 1 earned run. He walked 4, struck out 4. Kashuk, as we talked about, 2 hits, 2 earned runs. Yeah, he's got an inning pitched here and an 18 ERA. So I think it's possible he had another real bad outing that I missed. But my hunch is this was his first performance of the playoffs, and it was not a good one. So not an optimal result for us. We've got a day off to recover before we drive to Toronto from Buffalo for game number 3 of this series. The goal is to win 2 of these. We'll see if we can get the job done. Certainly need to win at least 1 to head back to Buffalo, but certainly would rather be heading back to Buffalo up 3-2 rather than down 3-2 with our backs against the wall. We've got the young right-hander Danny Black on the mound going up against Angelo Salazar, 38-year-old right-hander, 11-13 with a 4.60 ERA. His stuff is not exceptional. He is a crafty veteran, though, making $27 million, and he's a 2-time All-Star, although it's been 6 years since he was last in the All-Star game, but still an established major leaguer who has been excellent in these playoffs with a 2-0 record and a 1.95 ERA. And Toronto takes the lead, 5-4 win today, and they are up 2-1 on us. So we were 3 wins away from winning it all 3 days ago. We're still 3 wins away as we get ready for game number 4. Salazar with the W, his 3rd of the playoffs. Black with the loss. Got a home run from Toledo, but after taking a 3-0 lead on them, they jumped back with 3 in the bottom of the 4th and 2 in the bottom of the 5th to take that 5-4 lead. Added a run in the 6th, but that was as close as we would get. And the dream season is teetering closer and closer to becoming a nightmare. Only 4 hits on the day for Buffalo. Not a lot of offense. Black, 5 hits, 5 earned runs, 3 walks over 4 1/3, so certainly not sharp. The relievers were good after Black left, but Salazar did the job. 4 earned runs, only 2 earned over 6 2/3 innings. And we're now in a situation where if we don't win one of the next 2 games, our season will be over. Joey Bills, the young right-hander on the mound for us. Mike Corrigan for the Blue Jays, a left-hander, combined for a 9-15 record with Toronto and the Mets this year. Looks like they picked him up right before the trade deadline to help their playoff push, and they're in the World Series, so that worked out for them. And we do get a W here today, 4-3 game. Bills with the win, McClintock with the save, Aguayo Leal with a home run. Good to see him bouncing back from that jammed finger. So now a critical Game 5 coming up tomorrow in Toronto. I think I said this a year ago in the World Series when I believe we faced a similar situation in Game 5. Do kind of feel with the way this series has gone, whoever gets this win in game number 5 is probably going to win the series. Take a look at the game 4 or box score. We scored all 4 of our runs in the 4th inning. 2-run single by Casares and then a 2-run homer by Aguayo Leal. They came back with runs in the 5th, 6th, and 9th. So our bullpen has been giving up some runs in these playoffs. Definitely not as incredible as they were throughout the regular season. It didn't cost us today, has cost us in the past. We're in a situation now, though, where it is a 3-game series to determine the World Series champion. Bills, excellent. 4 hits, no walks, 8 strikeouts, 2 earned runs over 7 innings. Palencia and McClintock pitched the last 2 innings. Kind of wondering why we haven't seen more of Mr. Auclair recently in those spots. Maybe they had a bunch of righties, so our manager decided to go with the right-handed pitching Palencia. Corrigan, 6 hits, 2 walks, 4 earned runs over 6 2/3. So we are heading to a pivotal game number 5. Jim Lance, who was 4-0 in the playoffs a year ago, has an opportunity to get to that same record here today in game number 5. As I said, I feel like if we win this one today, we're in pretty good shape. Going up against Weichel, those were the 2 who got the decisions in the first game of this series. We are hoping for a repeat performance, even though we are on the road. And we do get a 4-2 win. Lance with his 4th win of the playoffs. McClintock with his 2nd save of the series. I believe that's his 7th save of the playoffs. Laurent took the loss in relief. The Blue Jays jumped out to a 2-0 lead, run-scoring triple from Polite in the 3rd. But we chipped back with a run in the 4th, and then in the 6th, the run-scoring single from Casares and a 2-run double by Reichert. So I'd like to see those 2 guys perhaps finally heating up here in the very late stages of this season. Casares 2 for 5 with the ribby. Reichert 1 for 2 with the 2 ribbies. Reichert still just hitting a $179, no homers and 6 ribbies for a guy who's led the National League in ribbies for 3 straight years with 40-plus home runs each of those seasons. Feels like we got to get a home run from him in the playoffs, and I think if we do get a home run from him, it's going to really mean a lot for our chances. Lance 4-0 in the postseason for a 2nd consecutive year with a 1.59 ERA. He's done his job. Kashuk, Auclair, Caper, and McClintock combined for the last 3 2/3 innings of scoreless relief. Weichel was okay over the 4 innings he pitched, scattered 5 hits and 6 walks over those 4 innings, but was ultimately only responsible for 1 earned run. But Laurent came on and did not do a great job in relief. Ramiro Medina ties the NL playoff game record, walking 4 times. Lance, not surprisingly, the pitcher of the game, player of the game, more accurately. And so for the 2nd year in a row, we'll be taking a 3-2 lead home for the potential final 2 games of the 2048 season. We are now just 1 win away from history. Can we avoid a massive upset? We've talked about this before. I'm probably jinxing myself by even saying what I'm going to say now, but 127 wins, the most in baseball history, the best winning percentage in baseball history, excluding that wacky 19th century, the biggest division or league leading margin in history, and we now take a 3-2 lead home against a team that we won 41 more games than a year ago. If these Blue Jays are to come back, it is the miracle on ice in 1980. It is Buster Douglas beating Mike Tyson a decade after that. It is the New York Giants and David Tyree with the helmet catch upsetting the 18-0 New England Patriots in the Super Bowl 19 years after Douglas Tyson. This would be one of the biggest upsets in sports history if we don't get the job done now. 1 win away. We've got our ace, Nehemiah Vidale, who still does not have a win this postseason on the mound, going up against Jonathan Chapman. Would be the perfect spot for Vidale to get a W. And unfortunately, we are headed to a Game 7. Can the Toronto Blue Jays shock the world and shock our Buffalo Wings? They certainly did here in Game 6. 10-4 victory. Vidale, not good in these playoffs after a brilliant regular season. Blue Jays jumped on us with 3 in the first, although we did come back with 2 in the bottom of the second. Run scoring double from who else? Velasco. Added a run in the second to take a 4-2 lead. We chipped back at it in the 6th, traded runs in the 7th, but then in the 8th they got an insurance run, and then 4 more in the 9th. Eau Claire, not good. Palencia, not good. Kashuk, not good. And Vidale, 10 strikeouts in 6 innings is good, but a 4.50 ERA and an 0-2 record in the postseason after going 20-3 with a 1.83 ERA in the regular season is not what we wanted. And the Blue Jays are now going to have the opportunity to complete one of the greatest upsets in sports history. Angelo Salazar, we talked about him, the 38-year-old veteran. He's been almost as good as Lance in these playoffs. 3-0 with a 2.10 ERA. We've got the youngster, Danny Black. A lot of pressure on the 25-year-old. The 2-1 record is fine. 5.62 ERA, though, this postseason. It has not been vintage Danny Black. And they won this matchup 5-4 the last time it happened. The Buffalo Wings, 1 win away from history and being able to claim by almost any standard or metric you can use that they have had the greatest season in baseball history. But the Toronto Blue Jays are also 1 game away from scoring one of the greatest upsets in the history of sports. What will the result be here in Game 7? And the Buffalo Wings, 4-1 winners. Black gets the W. Salazar takes the loss. McClintock with his 3rd save of the World Series. Arturo Casares, the most valuable player. And the Buffalo Wings did it the hard way. But with 138 wins in this season, including the playoffs, can rightly claim to be the greatest team in baseball history. Scored a run in the 2nd. Huntington, the catcher, with an RBI single. Added another in the 3rd. Toronto came back to close the deficit to 2-1 in the top of the 5th. But then in the bottom of the 5th, Reichert, run-scoring double. Casares, run-scoring single. The 2 guys that we've been talking about all playoffs who needed to come through in the clutch did finally. Reichert only a 190 average in the playoffs, no homers, 7 ribbies. His playoff performances have generally not been up to the standard he has set during the regular season. But the Buffalo Wings are still World Series champions here. As I mentioned, back-to-back World Series champions. 4 of the last 5 years, 5 of the last 8 years. And we've capped it off with a ridiculous 127 and 35 record in the regular season. 2 hits, 1 walk, 4 strikeouts, 1 earned run on a solo homer allowed by Black. Palencia, Aguirre, Auclair, and McClintock combined for the final 3 2/3 innings of scoreless baseball, allowing just 2 hits and 1 walk. And it wasn't as easy as some of the other championships for this Buffalo Wings franchise have been. But with OOTP 25 looming tomorrow, feels like a very fitting way to near the end of this series that we've been playing for close to a year in OOTP 24. And our Buffalo Wings, as we talked about, the 2048 World Series champions, 1484 season score. I want to say I feel like we had 1 year that for some wacky reason was higher than that. I can't imagine how we could have gotten a higher score than that, so maybe I'm just totally making that up, but I feel like we had a wacky high score some year. No, not that high. Again, yeah, we were 1256 in 2044 was the highest we've had. Maybe I was confused by the year that we won 100 games, won the World Series, and only had an 889. But that 1484 is a crazily high number. But to be fair, 127 wins in the regular season and a 2.65 team ERA are pretty crazy numbers as well. So our Buffalo Wings are the champions. The Blue Jays gave us a heck of a series. Would have been a devastating loss, but fortunately we came through and got the job done. And we've got a lot of decisions to make this offseason. Closer Chris McClintock with an option year. Center fielder Ishmael Velasco with an option year. Stopper Floyd Auclair with an option year. Our budget ticks up $2 million to $260 million, so consistently playing tons of playoff games, making a lot of extra money, and winning World Series championships has helped us there. Our owner, after careful consideration, yes, I'm sure that was a tough debate for you with the way our team has been playing, to graciously give me 1 more year. Chris Ames, you penny-pinching weasel. Looks like we've let Peyton Glavin leave. We intentionally didn't re-sign him. We're hoping to find someone better for our DSL team to coach us. But there's going to be some interesting decisions this offseason, because although Auclair and McClintock have been, particularly in the regular season, an incredible back end of our bullpen for us for the last several years, they're both making good money, and Velasco is going to be making good money as well. And when we look at our salary situation, you can see it right here. We're $37 million in the red. Now, we can fix that if we want to cut scouting and player development back dramatically. But the most logical way to cut that back is going to be to move on from some of the team eligible player or the team option players we have this offseason, as well as some of the arbitration eligible players who are starting to make pretty decent money. And there are several of them that fit that as well. So going to be an offseason full of some big decisions for the Buffalo Wings. But fortunately, we're going to be doing it from a position of strength, coming off of the most dominant season in the long history of Major League Baseball. So as I said, we've got OOTP 25 tomorrow. My attention will start being pulled in that direction, but we've still got 2 more seasons of the Buffalo Wings to get through to meet our commitment to our loyal viewers. And if you're still listening to or watching this episode, you are among that crew of very appreciated and loyal viewers. Committed to get through at least 2 more seasons to find out whether franchise icon Deshaun Seifu is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. But there is a part of me that, especially with the new version of the game coming out tomorrow, thinks that we'll certainly sim another couple of seasons to find out about Seifu and how some of our players perform in the future. But if you want to kind of end the active general manager portion of this series on a high note, I don't know how there can be much of a higher note than 8 consecutive trips to the NLCS, 5 consecutive years with 100 wins, 5 World Series titles in the last 8 years, 4 World Series titles in the last 5 years, and the greatest regular season in Major League history in the season that we just completed. So there is definitely a part of me that thinks I may retire and go out on top. It's so rare for people to go out on top. And I like to do it myself, even if it's only in these fantasy worlds that I'm occupying right now. But I'll sleep on that decision this evening. If you've got thoughts on what we should do, always helpful to hear them in the comment section down below. Regardless of whether I'm still the active general manager or not, we will in the coming days and possibly weeks be finding out about Mr. Seifu in the Hall of Fame, as well as some other questions on this team. The only question is how actively I am involved in managing the team going forward, because it does seem somewhat fitting with the best season in baseball history. Pretty sure that's the best season I've ever had in OOTP, whether it is a posted series online over the last few years at our YouTube channel, or even just playing offline on my own over the years before that and during this YouTube series. I don't know how you can go out on a better note than this. So there is part of me with the new game coming out tomorrow thinking perhaps my days as the active manager and or general manager of the Buffalo Wings are now at a close. But we will figure that out shortly. Until our next episode, when we'll recap the season, check in on all of the excellent performances we have this year, and start outlining a potential plan for the off-season. Thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.